So the premise for this theme is basically to segue off of this scenario, even though it's not necessarily related. But this is about a dystopian novel about if a dictator took over America, and it pretty much is symbolic to some people's minds as the Trump administration. But I think it's also possible that it could be signaling to like DeSantis as well. Now this book was written a while ago, so I'll get to it. It Can't Happen Here is a 1935 dystopian political novel by the American author Sinclair Lewis, set in the fictionalized version of 1930s United States. It followed an American political Berzelius Buzz Windrop, who quickly rises to power to become the world's first outright dictator, in allusion to Adolf Hitler's rise to power in Nazi Germany. And Doremus Jessup, a newspaper editor who sees Windrop's fascist policies for what they are ahead of time, and who becomes Windrop's most adherent critic. The novel was adapted into a play by Lewis and C. Moffat in 1936. The novel was published during the heyday of fascism in Europe, which was reported on by Dorothy Thompson, Lewis' wife. The novel describes the rise of Berzelius Buzz Windrop, a demagogue who was elected president of the United States after fomenting fear and promising drastic economic and social reform, while promoting a return to patriotism and traditional values. After his election, Windrop takes complete control of the government via self-coup and imposes totalitarian rule with the help of ruthless paramilitary force, in the manner of European fascists such as Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. The novel's plot centers on journalist Doremus Jessup's opposition to the new regime and his subsequent struggle against it as part of a liberal rebellion. In 1936, Senator Berzelius Buzz Windrop is a charismatic and power-hungry politician from an unnamed U.S. state, enters the presidential election campaign and populist platform, promising to restore the country to prosperity and greatness, and promising each citizen $5,000 per year, portraying himself as a champion of, quote, the forgotten men, end quote, and traditional American values. Windrop defeats incumbent President Franklin D. Roosevelt for the Democratic nomination, and then easily beats his Republican opponent, Senator Walt Trowbridge, in the November election. Having previously foreshadowed some authoritarian measures to reorganize the United States government, Windrop rapidly outlaws dissent, incarcerates political enemies in concentration camps, and trains an arms and paramilitary force called the Minutemen, named after the Revolutionary War militias of the same name, who terrorize citizens and enforce the policies of Windrop and his compatriot regime. Damn. So, some of this has happened as Trump has hired, I don't know if this was the GOP, but I think it was Trump related with the GOP hiring militias to harass a Republican who was told to gather fake votes and didn't do it. And I think his family was like threatened and such. Okay. God damn, I forgot where I was. Okay, one of Windrop's first acts as president is to eliminate the influence of the United States Congress, which draws the ire of many citizens as well as the legislators themselves. The Minutemen respond to protest against Windrop's decisions harshly, attacking demonstrators with bayonets. In addition to these actions, Windrop's administration, known as corpo government, curtails women's and minorities' rights and eliminates individual states by subdividing the country into administrative sectors. The government of these sectors is managed by corporal authorities, usually prominent businessmen or Minutemen officers. Those accused of crimes against the government appear before kangaroo courts presided by military judges. A majority of Americans approve of these dictatorial measures, seeing them as painful but necessary steps to restore American power. Open opponents of Winthrop, led by Senator Trowbridge, form an organization called the Underground, named after the Underground Railroad, helping dissidents escape to Canada and distributing anti-Winthrop propaganda. One recruit to the new Underground is Daramus Jessup, the novelist's protagonist, a traditional liberal and an opponent of both corporatism and communism, the latter being suppressed by Winthrop's administration. Jessup's participation in the organization results in the publication of the periodical called Vermont Vigilance, in which he writes editorials decrying Winthrop's abuses of power. Even before Winthrop's election, Jessup brings up the possibility of fascism coming to America, but Francis Tasbro, and wealthy owner of the quarry in Jessup's hometown of Fort Belleau, Vermont, dismisses it with the remark that it simply, quote, can't happen here, hence the novel's title. Shed Ledoux, the local district commissioner and Jessup's former hired man, dissents his own employer. Ledoux eventually discovers Jessup's actions and has him sent to a concentration camp. Ledoux subsequently terrorizes Jessup's family, and particularly his daughter, Sissy, who unsuccessfully attempts to seduce. Sissy discovers evidence of corrupt dealings on the part of Ledoux, which she exposes to Francis Tesbro, a one-time friend of Jessup and Ledoux's superior in the administrative hierarchy. Tesbro has Ledoux imprisoned in the same camp as Jessup, where inmates sent there by Ledoux organize his murder. After a relatively brief incarceration, Jessup escapes when his friends bribe one of the camp guards. He flees to Canada, where he rejoins the new Underground. He later serves the organization as a spy, passing along information and urging locals to resist Winthrop. In time, Winthrop's hold on power weakens as the economic prosperity he promised fails to materialize, and increased numbers of disillusioned Americans, including Vice President Pearlie Beecroft, flee to both Canada and Mexico. Winthrop also angers his Secretary of State, Lee Saracen, and had served earlier as chief political operator and advisor. Saracen and Winthrop's other lieutenants, including General Dewey Hawke, seized power and exiled the president to France. Saracen succeeds Winthrop, but his extravagant and relatively weak rule creates a power vacuum in which Hawke and others vie for power. In a bloody push, Hawke leads a party of military supporters into the White House, kills Saracen and his associates, and proclaims himself president. The two coups cause a slow erosion of corporal power, and Hawke's government desperately tries to arouse the patriotism by launching an unjustified invasion of Mexico, slandering the country in state-run newspapers, and ordering a mass conscription of young American men, infuriating many who had until then been staunch corporal loyalists. Riots and rebellions break out across the country, which many, realizing the corpos have misled them. General Emmanuel, I don't know if I can say that. General Emmanuel C., one of Hawke's senior officers, defects to the opposition with a large portion of his army, giving a strength to the resistance movement. Although Hawke remains in control of much of the country, a new civil war soon breaks out as the resistance tries to consolidate its grasp on the Midwest. The novel ends after the beginning of the conflict, with Jessup working on an agent for new Underground in corporal-occupied portions of southern Minnesota. The reception. Reviewers at the time, and historians and literary critics ever since have emphasized the resemblance of Louisiana politician Huey Long, who used strong-arm political tactics, who was building a nationwide Share Our Wealth organization in preparing to run for president in 1936 election. Long was assassinated in 1935, just prior to the novel's publication. According to Bollard, 1998, quote, "The most chilling and uncanny treatment of Huey by the writer came from Sinclair Lewis' It Can't Happen Here," end quote. Lewis portrayed a genuine U.S. Dictator on the Hitler model. Starting in 1936, the Works Progress Administration, a New Deal agency, performed a stage adaptation across the country. Lewis had the goal of hurting Long's chances in the 1936 election. Keith Perry argues that the key weakness in the novel is not that he decks out U.S. politicians with sinister European touches, but that he finally conceives of fascism and totalitarianism in traditional U.S. political models rather than seeing them as introducing a new kind of society, a new kind of regime. Winthrop is less a Nazi than a con map plus Rotarian, a manipulator who knows how to appeal to people's desperation, but neither he nor his followers are in the grips of the kind of world-transforming ideology like Hitler's Nazism. Okay. Adaptation stage. Hold on. This is what I wanted to read specifically. Alright. Several writers have compared the demagogue Buzz Winthrop to Donald Trump. Michael Polson wrote in 19 New York Times that Berkeley Repertory Theater's 2016 rendition of the play aimed to provoke discussion about Trump's presidential candidacy. Writing for The Guardian, Jules Stewart discussed the similarities between Trump's America and the country as depicted in the book. In Salon, Malcolm Harris stated, quote, "Like Trump, Winthrop uses a lack of tact as a way to distinguish himself," end quote. And, quote, "The social forces that Winthrop and Trump invoke aren't funny, they're murderous," end quote. In the Washington Post, Carlos Lazota compared Trump to Winthrop, opining that, quote, "It is impossible to miss the similarities between Trump and totalitarian figures in American literature," end quote. Jacob Weisberg wrote in Slate that one, quote, "can't read Lewis' novel today without flashes of Trumpian recognition," end quote. Following the results of the 2016 United States presidential election, sales of It Can't Happen surged significantly, and it appeared on Amazon.com's list of best-selling books. Penguin Modern Classics released a new edition of the novel on January 20th, 2017, the same day as the inauguration of Donald Trump. Damn. In 2018, HarperCollins published In 2018, HarperCollins published Can It Happen Here? Authoritarianism in America, a collection of essays about the prospect of authoritarianism in the United States, edited by Cass Sunstein. In 2019, Robert Evans published the podcast series It Could Happen Here, which speculated on the causes and consequences of the hypothetical Second American Civil War. Damn. In 2021, the New York University Press published a book, It Can Happen Here, White Power and the Rising Threat of Genocide in the U.S., by genocide scholars Alexander Labin Hinton. Hinton argued that, quote, "there is a real risk of violent atrocities happening in the United States." Okay. Alright, that's what I wanted to read from that. And that's pretty fucking legit. So I imagine anyone reading who could more or less see the connections more than I could possibly message in the comment section if you want. If you've read the book and you've seen the connections, just comment down below. Oh, and this was proposed. I'm pretty sure this isn't happened at all yet, because I remember, like, way after this was a thing, Joe Biden had LGBT stuff at the White House. So I feel like that sort of predates the. Sorry, I feel like this is almost inconsequential compared to where the White House sort of has stood symbolically as of late. Um, Anyways, Florida GOP proposal would ban pride flag, but let Confederate flag fly at state building. I doubt anyone is surprised by this. Alright. A Republican lawmaker in Florida filed a legislation Tuesday exempting the Confederate flag from a broad proposal to ban most flags from being flown outside a government building in the state, including LGBT pride flag, as culture war issues take the forefront as Florida's GOP led a legislative session. State Senator Jay Collins, R. Tampa, filed an amendment to the flag ban bill, listing the Confederate flag among 12 types of flags specifically exempt from the ban, among with the likes of the U.S. flag, state flag, and flags of municipalities. The amendment largely adds a handful of exemptions to the list of previously proposed in the State House bill, which did not include the Confederate flag. The modern use of the Confederate flag emerged as a reference to the Civil War, where it was a battle flag, and in opposition to the Civil Rights Movement, where more recently is widely associated with white supremacist groups and right-wing extremists. Republican lawmakers have framed the bill as a helpful clarification to existing flag guidelines, but critics note the proposal comes after a series of controversial incidents involving pride flags. Surfside Mayo Shlomo Danziger notably refused calls to raise rainbow flags last June for Pride Month, saying it would pave the way for Nazis and Satanists to demand the display of their flags at public buildings. Miami-Dade Country School Board member Roberto Alonso also proposed prohibiting the display of the flags that promote a political issue, end quote. In December, which came months after Sarasota County School ordered a teacher to take down a rainbow-colored coexist flag from his classroom, citing a ban on political activity on its campus. Alright. Critical quote, it is just clearly lines up with what flags can be flown over government facilities, like the state flag, the American flag, and POW flag, and our firefighters flag, Collins told WFOR TV earlier this month. Chief critic Orlando Gonzalez, the executive director of the Miami-based LGBT activist group Safeguarding America Values for Everyone, recently called the proposed flag ban, quote, a fake, postured, patriotic bill, end quote, telling the Miami New Times, quote, it's not just about what's being emphasized, but what's being excluded. This is actually pretty clever for these sickos to omit the Confederate flag. You know, they did this on purpose, but without saying it. So, I will have to say, this is, obviously people are going to spot this, but in terms of catching them say this, we can only say, well, they omitted the Confederate flag from the list. And you could just be stupid and say, oh, they just forgot it. Yeah, okay. Surprising fact, Florida still recognizes Confederate Memorial Day, Robert E. Lee's birthday, and Jefferson Davis' birthday as official state holidays. What to watch for? Florida Republicans are also looking to pass legislation expanding the state's so-called Don't Say Gay law by applying it to charter schools and private pre-K programs, and adding a provision explicitly stating school personnel and students do not have to call someone by a pronoun that doesn't correspond to their sex at birth, among other provisions. Last year's Don't Say Gay law broadly banned discussions about, quote, sexual orientation or gender identity, end quote, in elementary school classrooms. Florida legislative session continues until May 5th. Damn. Okay. I think that's the end of that article. And there is more to this Florida Ron DeSantis shit. Like, I'm pretty sure he banned psychology just because to spite LGBT issues. It's insane. Alright. Time to escalate this to a more disturbing element of how it can't happen here, I guess. Alright. Alliance Defending Freedom. Sorry, loading. So, this is pretty messed up. Founded by some 30 leaders of the Christian God damn it. The Alliance Defending Freedom is a legal advocacy and training group that has supported the recriminalization of sexual acts between consenting LGBT adults in the U.S. and criminalization abroad, has defended state-sanctioned sterilization of trans people abroad, has contended that LGBT people are more likely to engage in pedophilia, and claims that, quote, a homosexual agenda, end quote, will destroy Christianity and society. ADF also works to develop religious liberty legislation and case law that will allow the denial of goods and services to LGBTQ people on the basis of religion. Since the election of President Trump, the ADF has become one of the most influential groups informing the administration's attack on LGBTQ rights. So we already went through that. ADF also works to develop a religious liberty legislation. I already read that. So, in its own words, by the ADF legal counsel Christian Halcombe, referring to trans female athletes as male in ADF news release 2019. Okay, quote, allowing males to compete in the female category isn't fair and destroys girls' athletic opportunities. Males will always have inherent physical advantages over comparably talented and trained girls. That's the reason we have girls' sports in the first place, and a male's belief about his gender doesn't eliminate those advantages. So, I really should have brought up this story that I just didn't really care to be on the opposition so much because, I mean, I think all these people are nutbags anyways, but there was this race of 10,000 people of women, and this trans woman, she came in 6,000th place, and along with the rest of the people who along with the rest of the 6,000 people, they beat 10,000, obviously. So this one woman, she didn't win. She did better than others, I guess. So, yeah, you can look that up. Honestly, it's ridiculous. And athletes are greater than normal people. This isn't just like a biology thing. Like a trained female athlete could biological woman athlete could probably, in like depending on what they train for, defeat an untrained, normal, healthy male. Like that's just how that probably is. So this isn't just a one-to-one, or this isn't just all black and white. It's really stupid, honestly. Like, you really think some average male is comparable to an athlete? Whatever. Anyways, Marissa Meyer, senior web writer on the ADF website, 2019. Quote, men who self-identify as women are still biologically men. Sure, they can take synthetic hormones to make themselves appear more feminine, style their hair, and wear makeup or not, but not being a woman is more than physical appearance or feeling. It is a biological reality, and no amount of wishing or desire will ever change the fact that a feminized man will never truly experience what it is to be a woman. I feel like for the most part, the hormones sort of change your perspective on things, and there is no inherent wanting to have children. That's what these Christians and fertility cultists usually cling to when it comes to femininity. That's all they care about. There's tons of women who can't have kids or don't want kids. Are they less of? And are they just going to just cling to chromosomes of a person that doesn't optically perform how the chromosomes they expect out of it, So, just goes against the social construct of how women are framed as just childbearing entities. Anyways, by the ADF affiliated attorney Charles Lee Mindry, quote, "The Tyranny of Made-Up Sexual Identities," 2015. Okay, quote, the only surprise is the rapidity with which this degradation of our human dignity has occurred. It has occurred with raging effect and with 12 months on the heels of government-mandated recognition of same-sex marriage, an oxymoronic institution if there ever was one, and for its radical adherents. This has led to a deification of deviant sexual practices. It has further resulted in the inevitable and aggressive persecution of devout Christians who refuse to bow to the false god of sexual license. False? Okay. I don't know what to say to that, honestly. That's just weird. Okay. Quote, "The endgame of the homosexual legal agenda is unfettered sexual liberty and the silencing of all dissent end quote, by ADF Senior Counsel Eric Stanley at the Gospel, Homosexuality and the Future of Marriage Conference, 2014. Alright. If I were to comment on all these, it would just be obvious critiques, so just gotta shake my head and scream on the inside. Sorry about that. Quote, "Alliance Defending Freedom seeks to recover the robust Christian demonic theology of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries. This is Catholic universal orthodoxy, and it is desperately crucial for cultural renewal. Christians must strive to build glorious cultural cathedrals rather than shanty tin sheds." End quote. Blackstone Legal Fellowship website, 2014. I've heard of Blackstone, I think. It sounds like one of those conspiracy-like things that people would be ambiguously bring it up ambiguously as if there's like some cabal to it. I mean, we got a quote right there. How cabal and hidden could you be? Anyways. Quote, "When given the same choice the Supreme Court of the United States had in Lawrence v. Texas, the Indian court did the right thing. India chose to protect society at large rather than give to a vocal minority of homosexual advocates." Oh, hold on.